So let's go ahead and start the recording. And I believe we are live. So good afternoon and happy Sunday, everybody. I'm excited to get us started for today's event. So my name is Hilton Cole. I'm a proud member of the Dulles-Leesburg alumni chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi, and an even prouder chairman of our Guide Ride initiative, catered to serving and mentoring the youth of our Northern Virginia community. So today is a special day as we're holding our first annual communications webinar. We really do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us for this special event. And then to give a little bit of a background of the concept of this event began from a request from our Kappa Leaguers, a group of exceptional young high school men that we have the privilege of working with closely as the flagship program of our Guide Ride initiative. During one of our brainstorming sessions for the year, our Kappa Leaguers had approached us with the idea of holding an event that would help them become better communicators in how to speak and write confidently as they grow older and get more opportunities in the spotlight. So we wholeheartedly felt that this was an event that was important as we believe that you can effectively communicate and sell yourself or sell your message, whatever that is, that you'll be powerful, and this would be a powerful tool in your toolkit to carry with you later on in life. And then in the age of COVID, we also felt that it was proper to ensure that regardless of your need to speak your message in person or speak it online, that you can do so. Later on in the session, we'll talk about how to communicate successfully on video platforms such as this right here, Zoom, Google Meets, WebEx, or whatever it may be. And then lastly, this webinar is going to be the first of a series of recorded virtual events that we'll be adding to our catalog of training for leadership materials for our students. So regardless of you're able to participate live or not, you'll still have access to all the learnings that we hope to get out of today's event. So then without further ado, I have the privilege of introducing our superstar set of panelists. I'll ask the panelists to unmute themselves momentarily and to tell us a little bit about them and their background. We're really excited to have a great set of teachers who practice effective communication skills on their day-to-day and their professional lives and what they do for Kappa and what they do for the broader community. And just to give a little bit of introduction, so Mr. Mervyn Levy is going to kick us off with how to communicate in the traditional manner, which is face-to-face, and then on one-on-one formats and working with teams. Mr. Rico Cody is then going to pick up the torch and then take us through how to be a masterful communicator through writing, specifically in email. And then last but not least, Mr. Nolan will carry us home with a fresh take on how to get a point across through your computer screen, as we're confident that communicating through digital platforms like this is going to be, in some capacity, be a part of the new normal going forward. All right, so Mr. Levy, I'll give the floor to you if you just introduce yourself really briefly, good brother.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Cole, and thank you, Mrs. Fowles, for inviting me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here to speak to the young men today. My name is Mervyn Levy. I am a director of operations at a company called Mantech in their cyber advanced research and development area. I've been doing this for a long, long time. My background is in systems engineering and computer science.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Levy. And then Mr. Rico Cody, I'll pass it over to you if you can just briefly introduce yourself, good brother.
Excellent. Good afternoon, all, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I certainly think I will enjoy this a lot. So my name is Rico Cody. I am retired from the Air Force 27 years as what they call a cyber operations officer. Right now I'm working for a large telecom provider in the Northern Virginia area as what they call an enterprise solutions architect. So looking forward to pass on some of the things that I've practiced and have been taught to me over the years. So can't wait. So glad to be here.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Cody. And then last but not least, Mr. Nolan, your turn.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the opportunity and the privilege. Good afternoon, young men. My name is Keith Nolan. I am an electrical engineer. I received my degree from Tennessee State University in Nashville. I currently work for the United States State Department. I am a program manager, but I also work in the area of cybersecurity as well as network security. So very much looking forward to speaking with you young men. So thank you for the opportunity.
Hey, Mr. Nolan, thank you so much. All right, brothers, thank you all for your, those introductions. So a brief note before I hand the floor over to Mr. Levy. So each of our panelists is going to be given the floor in order to speak their section of today's webinar. Feel free to, for our attendees, feel free to, as they're speaking, to write questions in the Q&A section of the webinar. Myself and Mrs. Sprouse are going to be monitoring those questions in the webinar And then what we're going to do is hold on to those questions until the end. So to our presenters, go ahead and present without stopping. At the end, we'll pause and then take questions before giving the floor to the next speaker. Any questions? You can go ahead and post in the chat if you have any questions. 5, 4, 3, 2. All right. That's the case, Mr. Levy. It's your show.
Well, once again, thank you again for the opportunity to be here with you this afternoon and to talk about communication. In a setting, be it a small group, a large group, be it one-on-one, if you are the person that is going to be doing the communicating, the thing that I want to have you be aware of, the most important thing is be prepared. Some of the things that you need to do is, if you know what the topic is, you need to rehearse what you want to say before you say it. When I say that, it's not to write down a script. It's not something that you're going to read off, but certainly in your mind, run through it over and over again. This is what I want to say. These are the major points I want to get across. That way, as you're speaking, you're not reaching for those ideas, and you've already formulated in your mind the path or the journey that you want to take the listener or the observer on as you go through the information that you want to present. So know what you want to say before you actually need to say it. The second thing you need to do is when you're presenting or when you're talking or when you're meeting with people and you are the leader, you tend to get in the situation where you're trying to get all the information out at once. And you tend to start to rush and you speed your speech up and you stop thinking about what you're going to say. The most important thing is monitor yourself and slow down your speech. If you want to be an effective communicator, people need to be able to understand what it is you're saying. So your ideas need to be crisp and clear. Your speech needs to be clear, and you need to project so that they can understand. I've been in a lot of meetings over my career, and the ones that are most painful for me is when I either cannot readily understand what the speaker is saying, or if I can't follow the idea that they're trying to present. Then you start to check out and you just lose focus. The third thing you need to do, I think, is give some breathing room. If you're in a meeting and the meeting is for information purposes, that means that you are downloading information to others. At some point, at strategic points, as you're giving the information, you need to pause to give people time to digest what you've just said, reflect on it, and ask any questions. If it is a conversation, if it's a back and forth that you're going, you need to make your point and then you need to stop. That allows people to receive what you're saying and then rebut or come back with another question. So in all of this, it's not about rushing through. It's not about getting it done as quickly as possible. It's about imparting the information that you want to impart in a way that's understandable, taking a pause and giving people time to absorb it and respond to it. As you're presenting, one idea or concept at a time. Pick what you want to say, give that idea, give that concept, pause, go on to the next idea, the next concept. That allows people to follow along with you. They're not in your head. They don't know where you're trying to take them. So you have to make sure that you are putting up these precise and visible markers of, here's one idea, now I'm transitioning to the next, now I'm transitioning to the next. And when you get to the end, you can wrap it up and they'll go like, okay, now I see what it is you were doing. Big thing for me, start on time, respect other people's time. If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. That's just the way I am. If the meeting's supposed to start and people are sitting there, make sure you are there and ready to start. You can choose to delay, but do not be the person that everybody is waiting on. Have your act together, be professional, start on time. To that end, having an agenda is key. What that allows is it will lay out what's supposed to happen. It'll state the objectives or the expectations of the meeting or the gathering. People can follow along. You can use that also to manage your time. If a part of the agenda is taking an inordinate amount of time, or if the discussion is rich and you decide that you want to continue, then you understand that something at the back end of the agenda is going to have to drop off. Or you can say, we are running over time on this particular topic. Let's take a suggestion to table it for another time or another meeting. That way you can have the rich discussion that you need to have. But certainly an agenda helps people set expectations of what the meeting is going to be about, and then allows you to manage the time throughout the meeting. One thing that as a presenter, it's difficult to do. You get into this mode of just giving information and you're not listening to responses. You need to be an active listener, meaning that you put out an idea, you need to pause for a second, you need to read the room if you're able to see people. You need to listen to the questions that are being asked, not just assume that you know what they're already going to say. Listen to the question and give a real response to it. And there are two kinds of questions that you will run into. There are clarifying questions, which are based on fact. I heard you say, is that what you meant? And there are probing questions, which really are trying to draw out additional information. With a probing question, it's not something that you would necessarily have already been prepared to answer. It's probably something that's going to force you to think. So again, be an active listener. Make sure you understand the question that's being asked and take the time to answer it appropriately. A probing question might be, what would you change in order to do this, that, or the other? What do you feel is right? What's another way that you might do this, that, or the other? These kinds of questions are based on what you're saying. They're asking you to think a little deeper about the information and give them your feelings or your views on another part of that concept. So you might not already been prepared for that, but you have to be prepared to answer those kinds of questions. You need to be able to manage and curb your emotions. As the speaker, as the person that is managing this meeting, avoid the dismissive attitudes, avoid negative body language. You want to remain open to what people have to say. If they question you, it doesn't mean that you should be defensive. They're asking that question in order to gain additional information so that they can formulate their opinion, or they're asking that question to draw out more information that would be beneficial for the group. Very early in my career, I had to learn that just because I was presenting didn't mean that I was expected to know everything. I was not expected to be the expert on the spot. And when I was presenting to senior people, they would often ask me questions that I felt I couldn't answer because I wasn't prepared. I would get nervous, I would get anxious, and at some points I would get defensive. Then I was told, and I'm glad somebody told me this, it's not personal. We're asking a question because there's more information that we need to share with the group for everyone's knowledge. And even though you are the primary person in the conversation, you're not the only person in this conversation that might have an answer to the question. So it might have been a question that would allow somebody else in the group to provide additional information or additional perspective. So don't be afraid of those questions. Listen, curb your emotions. It's not personal. Answer as best you can. In informal environments, especially in small teams where you know people well, or even as the Kappa Leaguers, when you guys get together and you're of an age where there's a lot of joking around, a lot of kidding around, be respectful. Avoid demeaning or insulting behavior. If one of your Kappa Leaguers are standing up and trying to make a presentation, one of the most insulting and dismissive things you can do is not pay attention, is to talk while they are talking. It's to crack jokes. It's to, snicker and make remarks off to the side as someone is trying to present information. That's very disrespectful. They are there trying to provide a service or provide some information for the benefit of the group, and you as part of the group are not giving them the respect they're due by just sitting still and listening. You don't have to agree, but you do have to be respectful. And that goes both ways. If you're a presenter, you also need to be respectful of the audience. And part of the things we've already gone through with being on time, respecting their time, having an agenda, having your ideas clearly thought out, and being prepared is all showing respect to the audience or to the people that you are communicating with, that you think their time is valuable and you want to make the most of it. I'm going to stop right there because that in a nutshell really are just the basics of preparing for a meeting and being able to communicate effectively in person.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Levy. We really do appreciate that powerful presentation. So just a really quick recap. So we have some really important notes of setting an agenda, knowing your content of your talk track ahead of the meeting, being on time, being an active listener, curbing your own emotions, not getting defensive. And then when other people are speaking, to also be attentive, be an active listener to them, and then just giving them your full respect and your full attention. So thank you so much. All excellent points. We'll pause for a brief moment. I want to make sure that everyone in the chat has an opportunity to ask a question. Mr. Levy's taking his time to join us today. So you want to make sure that anything that you have questions on, or anything that you're curious about, or maybe it's a question that's outside of the content that Mr. Levy presented today, you want to make sure that you take this opportunity to go ahead and ask him this question while he's here with us. All right. So I'll be monitoring the Q&A. Okay. My tip for the group is anytime somebody's communicating a message to you, one good way of making sure that you're being an active listener is being engaged in the content and having questions to ask the presenter. All right, so I do see one question in the Q&A. So to Mr. Levy, what are some ways to practice your communication skills? And then assume that I'm in school, that I'm speaking with teachers, my peers, maybe my parents, maybe my youth group leaders and my church group leaders. What are just some opportunities I can have to practice my communication skills on a regular basis?
Every conversation is an opportunity to practice your communication skills. Every interaction where you are conveying ideas to someone else is an opportunity to practice. One of the key things that you can try to do is to be able to formulate your ideas in your mind as you are talking, so as to have a continuous stream of information in the conversation without a lot of breaks, without a lot of you knows or like or these connectors that you use, that people tend to use to fill up space as they are trying to formulate the next idea. So practice slowing down your speech, thinking ahead as you're speaking. So you're thinking about the next thing you want to say while you're saying what you have to say. That way the ideas just flow one after the other. A great example of this in practice is watching Mr. Cole. He came on here and he introduced everything. Went from the overview of what is Kappa League. He went into what this particular meeting was about. He went into the introduction of the speakers. He went into the expectations. All of that was one continuous stream of communication without any breaks. You didn't hear him fumbling for words. You didn't hear him look up into the sky and scratch his chin and say, what do I want to say next? So if you can just watch him and see how he does it, the cadence of his speech, he speaks clearly, but nothing is rushed. He's not trying to get through it. This is not painful for him. He wants to make sure that you hear, you listen, and you understand. Another great example, if you get the chance, is Mr. Wiggins just came on. I see him sitting there and, with his jacket on and whatnot, yo. He is a professional speaker. Another great example of someone that can stand up in front of people and present ideas in a coherent way. And there are basic things about how they do it. The cadence. They've thought through what they want to say. If they're speaking extemporaneously, which means off the cuff, then they have it in their mind that they can put these thoughts together. And then when they're done with their idea, they stop talking. They don't continue talking. They don't repeat it over and over again. They say what they need to say and they stop. So opportunities to practice. Every single conversation is an opportunity to practice those. And those basic things will make you a very effective communicator, no matter what the topic and no matter who you're talking to.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that response, Mr. Levy. That was well crafted, well put together. Thank you so much. All right. So we want to challenge the group to any more questions before we, we did get another one. Okay. So this question is, how do you practice speaking in front of larger groups of people, like a crowd?
Crowds are no different than 3 people, 5 people, 100 people. What you lose in a larger crowd is probably separation from people. So you're not getting that direct energy. It's probably difficult to see a lot of faces at one time, but you can certainly pick out one or two to focus on, making eye contact, especially when you have significant or important things to convey. It's always good to look somebody in the eye as you're saying it. Mr. Wiggins can probably give us all kinds of tips on the best ways when you're making a speech to get these points across. So there are those basic things. And there's also, I would recommend that you just go on Amazon and find a book on giving speeches. They've got all the great tips in there and all the scientific evidence of things that are known to make your presentation more effective. Just like I said, eye contact, body language, leaning in, cadence, pausing, emphasis, all of those things are scientifically broken down and can be practiced.
One last question, Mr. Cole, from one of our Kappa Leaguers for Mr. Levy, is related to changing communication, if needed, when communicating with friends versus talking in the business world. So the question specifically is, how should you change your communicating approach when talking with friends and talking in the business world, if at all?
Well, it's necessary. When you're talking with friends, it's very familiar. When you're talking with friends, you can easily fall into a slang and use terms and expressions that they readily understand. When you're talking with friends, the animation and the body language that you use naturally changes because you know your audience a lot better. You're more comfortable. When you're speaking in the business world, you don't want your actions, your tone, your body language, whatever it might be, to take away from the information that you are trying to impart. So in the business world, I don't come into a business meeting as myself. I come in as the position or the role that I hold in the company with the expectations of the importance of what I'm about to say. So I use that to put on the facade that I need, and then I go about presenting the information as expected. If I'm speaking to people, seniors above me, vice presidents, CEOs, whatever it is, I know the kind of information they're looking for. I know how they want it presented to them. I don't do it the same as if I'm speaking with my peers or people that work for me or report to me. So you have to know your audience. You have to package the information based on how the audience will best receive it. And you have to prepare yourself and be in the mindset of how you need to present yourself to have an effective conversation or effectively impart the information. When you're with friends, all bets are off. You can be however you are.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Levy. We hope that does answer all of the questions. If you do have any more questions that you think of as we continue for Mr. Levy, feel free to post them in the Q&A. What we'll be doing in the background is just making sure that we're answering those in the background. If Mr. Levy does have an answer, he'll put it in the chat, or he'll put in the answer, we'll figure that out. But what we're going to do now is transition on to Mr. Rico Cody, and then talk a little bit about how to be successful with written communications, and then some of the differences between written versus speaking. So without further ado, Mr. Cody, the floor is yours. All right, Mr. Cody is sharing your screen. So if you do have a phone, if you have a computer and it's in split screen, or if the window is minimized, he is sharing a screen. So you just want to make sure that your screen is maximized so that you can see everything on the page. All right, Mr. Cody, it's all you.
Thanks again, good brother. Just give me a minute here. Let me get my screen up here on my end, just to make sure I'm sharing appropriately. Excellent. Well, good afternoon again, everyone. Like I said, thanks for the opportunity again to be with you all and just to share things that some of my mentors have shared with me over the years of my professional career, whether in the Air Force or as I'm currently working now in private industry. So today, what I really want to talk about is effective communication in the written form. Whether it, primarily looking at email type of communications that we send on a day-to-day basis. So I trust my slide is projecting that says effective written communications.
Mr. Cody, we do see your screen. There's also 3 other windows that are in front of the slide as well. There we go.
Okay, I don't think it's the appropriate slide that's showing then.
So we see effective written communications. I saw that you minimized your 3 other windows.
I was probably sharing the wrong window, so let's make sure I'm sharing the right desktop here.
No problem at all.
Step 1.
I have multiple desktops myself, so I fully understand. Maybe Mr. Nolan later on will have some tips for us on how to manage multiple screens.
Desktop 2, are you just seeing just one screen now?
Absolutely, this is just one.
And you still seeing one?
Yep, effective written communications.
Okay, excellent. I have 3 monitors I am working with that I normally have for my home setup for work. So appreciate it. So thanks again. All right, so talking about today is just really effective communications via email, right? And so one of the things how I want to break this down is, just talk to you about how to write an effective professional email that you're going to send out to whomever. And I kind of break an effective email down into primarily 4 parts. I'll talk about it at the heading as one part, the greeting, the body, and the closure of that email. And let's just break it piece by piece and go over what I consider as some best practices that you might want to follow. So first and foremost, normally in the heading, you send in an email, your email address is going to appear to the recipient whenever you send an email. And one of the things, I would say is to make sure you have a professional email address. As you get more exposed and you mature, you grow more, you graduate college or in the business community, if you have an email that's an email address that could be somewhat not appropriate for the business world, so maybe you had something that really explained about you from when you were 16, 17, 18 years old, you're a party animal or whatever it is, right? My take on it is to keep it as vanilla as possible. Keep it as vanilla as possible as far as your email address go. You don't want to use something that's really inappropriate. And some folks carry the email address that they have from age 16, 17, all the way in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, and it might just not be appropriate for the business world. So that's for the heading of the email. In the greeting of the email, right? You want to be professional with that too as well. So, it's probably not good to just start an email off with, yo, or what up, or, be professional, use professional salutations to whomever you're talking to. All right, so it could be just a quick hello. It could be just a quick sir, ma'am. But you want to keep the greeting very, very, very professional. Let's discuss the body of the email, the content of the email. One of the things I took away from the military is we have an acronym. It's called BLUF, and it's called bottom line upfront. And if possible, I'll suggest that you do that, because people's time today, sometimes in business, they're very busy. Their time is precious, and it's important and it's good if you can just get your point up front of what the intent of the email is. What is it that you are trying to seek? What is the outcome that you are looking for? So I always, myself, from my experience, I always start off with a bluff, just so that that reader, that recipient knows, hey, here's what Rico is really looking for. Continuing with the body of the email, you want to be clear, you want to be concise, you want to do stuff like run spell check with that. All right, you don't want to run just type an email up and go ahead and just hit send. Once you hit send, that email is out there forever. All right, so look at that body, make sure you proofread it, make sure it's concise, make sure you run your spell check with it. And the closure of the email, ensure you have some type of signature block and some type of closing there, right? So it could be just your name and your phone number at the end of it. Or if you're a student, it's your name, student, and your phone number at the end of the email. So you want to approach it like that, make it look extremely professional, make sure they have a way to contact you, whether it's via phone that you can have up there. And again, starting from the top, make sure you have an appropriate email address. All right, make sure you have a greeting that is professional. Make sure you be clear, be concise, and one of the best way to do that is to lay a bottom line up front in the email and ensure you have some pretty good closure with that. My golden rules that I've used for any email communication. One is never write an email when you're angry. All right, never write an email when you're angry, because a lot of times when you think you're venting as you're writing an email, it could probably be interpreted quite significantly different once the recipient get that email. All right, and when you write something, it can be quite difficult to gauge, what exactly are you saying? What is the intent that you're trying to get across here? And when you write an email when you're angry, and especially after you hit send, you cannot take it back. You cannot take it back. So you may feel good at the moment as you were writing that, but the impact that it may have in the future may be quite negative for you. So keep angry emotions out of that, out of your email. My second golden rule: once you hit send on your email, it's in cyberspace forever. As an IT professional, as someone who is a cybersecurity professional in this field, I can tell you, once you hit send, it's there forever. And that piggybacks onto a third point that I have on here, stating that your email is not confidential. You may write an email and you may put a little message on there if you choose to say, hey, this is confidential, keep it between you and I. But you will be amazed the chain mail of how this email flows from one person to the next and so forth. So don't, let me say, assume that your email is not confidential. Assume that if you send it to one person, it'll probably get to a 10, 100, and so forth. Always have someone proofread your emails if you have the time. Being in the Air Force, I served 27 years. I commanded, where I commanded my own unit. And I remember as a commander, I used to write my email. I had an assistant who was 19 years old, was just out of high school, joined the Air Force. I can tell you every email I sent, I used to call that young man in my office and I said, Airman Richards, can you read this email for me and just let me know what you think? And you would be surprised, someone like me who's been in the Air Force for 27 years, been writing emails every single day, hundreds per day, you'll be surprised how many times Airman Richards identified something that I overlooked, some little mistakes that were in that email. So if you have an opportunity to have someone proofread your email, especially if it's important, have them do it. Feedback is nothing more than advice that you can improve upon. Other reasons why you should proofread your email: just to be professional with your email. You want to check for mistakes, make sure any spelling or grammar or any of those things are not within your email. You want to proofread for the tone. One of the things you might do is to read it as if you were someone else and see if you could possibly misinterpret it. And if that's the case, then you need to go ahead and change it. Look for attachments. If you claimed in your email that you are attaching something, make sure it is indeed attached. And you also want to proofread for clarity. Read through the email. Do your words imply things that are really not accurate? All right. So make sure that you're doing that. I always tell myself, if my spidey senses gives me some doubt, if I'm writing something and my spidey senses say, it's probably not appropriate, probably you shouldn't do that, or someone might probably question that. When in doubt, leave it out. Leave it out. If your spidey senses tell you that this may be a potential concern, leave it out. Those are rules that I have lived by, that I have practiced as I'm writing, and use them, put them in your toolkits. They may all not work for you. Maybe none of them will work for you, but I will encourage you to put this into your toolkit as something that you can look back on and choose if you desire to, as part of your ways to do effective communications. Moving on from emails, I'll just spend just a few seconds on text messages. And really generally, all of the rules, my golden rules for emails, they also apply for text messages. But there are a couple of things that I wanted to highlight on here. One, a lot of times we do text to speak. Nowadays, I would encourage you to make sure that you're just double checking what you're texting to speak. Speech recognition software sometimes don't always get it right. So I'll encourage you to double check whenever you're using that function. One thing I will highly encourage you not to do is, if you have bad news for someone, I would encourage you not to text that bad news. I would encourage you to be a little bit more personal with that. Reach out for a phone call or discuss something like that in person. But generally texting bad news is probably something that I would encourage you not to do. Emojis, I would say to use them appropriately. What you think what it means may mean something else in other places. I can tell you, having traveled all over the world in the military, a thumbs up sign doesn't mean something positive everywhere in the world where you are. So I would encourage you to use your emojis appropriately. And concluding all of this, really, whether it's a text message, you send in an email, if you know your audience, know the context, know the point that you're trying to get across in that email, do the appropriate things at the appropriate time. Right time, right place, right audience. And I'll close by saying this again. If your spidey senses tell you that something ain't right with this, listen to your spidey senses. Something is probably not right with it. That is all I have. Thank you. I stand ready for any questions or comments.
Mr. Cody, thank you so much. We really do appreciate that excellent presentation on how to be successful communicating in written context, whether it's through text messages or through email. Before we go on, we're going to challenge the audience to make sure that you come up with 2 or 3 questions that we can ask Mr. Cody while he's here with us today. And then we'll give him the opportunity to answer those before moving on. And then you can type those in the Q&A, and then we'll shout them out to the channel. This is an excellent one. So Mr. Cody, this question is, what are some of the most common mistakes that you see when you see people writing emails or writing text messages? The most common mistakes.
Well, so the most common that I see is really, and especially in business here, is really spelling errors. And I can tell you this, you can tell a lot about a person based on the content or the spelling or how that email is written. You know, if someone consistently have misspelling in their email, well, you know, someone may conclude that, you know, that person lacks attention to detail. You're just not a detail-oriented type person. You know, so the spelling error is something that, you know, I definitely see as one of the most common errors within the email.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Cody. So make sure that you guys are using that spell check and making sure that you're not making a habit of spelling words incorrectly too often. All right. So I see another question. So whenever I send emails, they're usually 3 to 4 paragraphs long that repeat what I'm trying to say. So how can I reduce my emails to 1 to 2 paragraphs at least, and then not repeat myself too much?
Well, again, I would say, you know, know your audience first of all, and number 2, what is the intent that you're trying to do with that email? There are times, for example, sometimes when you're communicating, and especially if you're making the verbal communication, like what I learned in the Air Force, we always have a format. You know, tell them what you are going to say, then tell them, and then tell them again by concluding it. So we did it kind of like in a 3-phase type of approach, and that was expected into the military community. What I would say to you is this: again, you say you write 3 or 4 paragraphs. Read that email over and ask yourself, do I really need 3 to 4 paragraphs to get this across? And again, if your spidey senses tell you, this is probably long, it's probably long. You know, if you read it and you say to yourself, this is probably a little bit too long. You know, put yourself in somebody else's shoes, not really yours, but put yourself in somebody else's shoes and try to anticipate their reaction. And make sure, and then, you know, focus your email, tailor it based on the situation and whomever that recipient is.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cody. And then we'll take one more question before moving on. All right, so if there's no more questions, we'll go ahead and pass the floor to Mr. Nolan. Thank you so much, Mr. Cody. So Mr. Nolan is going to teach us about how to communicate successfully in digital platforms such as Zoom or WebEx. So Mr. Nolan, without further ado, I'll give the floor to you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cole. Let me see if I can get my screen up here. Are you guys able to see these charts? Good to go? All right. So what I want you guys to know before I dive into this presentation is this is personal for me. I know I haven't been around. I have a lot of conflicts usually on Sundays, but I want you guys to take the term away, investment. Each one of the men that's been on this panel today, and even including myself, someone has taken the time to invest in us. So what you are learning is what people have placed into us. And so those things are now hopefully going to be transitioned to you. And as Mr. Cole said earlier today, if you learn early, or I'm sorry, Mr. Levy said, if you learn early, your opportunities abound sooner in your life and in your career, much faster than others. So Mr. Cole is 20 years my junior. I've learned so much from this young man, from his drive, his enthusiasm, and his passion. Same with Mr. Levy, as well as Mr. Wiggins and Mr. Sprouse. And from what I just learned from Mr. Cody, is so much information out here. And what you guys hopefully will take away is everything I'm about to say is really weird and funny. We've not had a conversation, but I'm saying pretty much almost the same exact thing. So you guys are going to hear a lot of that. So to get into this presentation, how to conduct yourself during a video teleconferencing briefing or call, I'm going to make an assumption that each and every one of you are doing distance learning, right? So a quick definition of distance learning is being able to communicate, two or more people being able to communicate, share information, share knowledge, and see each other from different locations. Very simple and easy definition of video teleconferencing. So outside of face-to-face communication, as Mr. Cole said earlier, this is probably going to be the preeminent way that communications will be done. And so we'll jump right in. How does it differ from face-to-face? The only thing is that you're virtual, right? You're online, it's not face-to-face. So the expectations do not change. Whether you're online or in person, your message, your delivery should stay the same. You should always be visible. So that shows that you are interested in what is being discussed, right? So you see a sample listing here of all the things, or some of the things, that video teleconferencing can be used for. And as Mr. Cody said, when you give a presentation, and you have to understand that you're not going to always be on the receiving end of a presentation. At some point, you yourself are going to have to be that person who gives the presentation. And so the way that you do that, and the term that he used, was a bottom line upfront statement. You sit down and you tell your audience why you are there and why they are there. Are you there to give them an informational brief? Is it just to share knowledge? Or are you there to get to request a decisional brief? That means you are bringing something tangible to the table that's going to either make their jobs better or change their bottom line for the positive. Sometimes it could be negative, but your job is to share that information to try to find out which way to go, because you need decisions that are higher than what you have the ability to make a decision on. And as Mr. Cody said, when you have a bottom line upfront statement, you let them know what you're going to tell them first and foremost. Then you tell them what you're telling them during the body of that presentation. And then when you end, you close out by saying what you told. So there's no way that they can leave that discussion or that presentation without knowing what it is. And on that bluff statement or that bluff page, there's something that's called a bang box. It's just a big rectangular box as your takeaway. If nothing else that those people leave that meeting with, you make sure that they understand this is the biggest takeaway that I want you to leave this presentation with. And it's upfront, it's easily visible because it's in a different colored box. And that's the takeaway that these folks are going to roll with your message. Now, to deal with your situation, with the times that we're in, you're home, and so you have something called distractions. So NBA 2K, what is it, Fortnite, things like that, right? You have these breaks, and so you have so many different things that can take you away from your focus. But that's where, as Kappa Leaguers and young men, young kings, I want you to understand that you're not just Kappa Leaguers to us, you are young kings. And what we are trying to do is take this investment that's been given to us and put it back into you, because you are the next part of the fertile ground of these Black men that are going to come up and lead. So take that, run with that, understand this is your DNA. You are from kings and queens. So grow, learn, listen. Mr. Cole and Mr. Sprouse are going to take you where you need to go, and we're going to fall in line and help them get you there. So we're going to get to the next stage here. Video telecommunication dues. As Mr. Levy said, be prepared, be on time. Speak clearly, speak with conviction, speak like you know what you're talking about. That's your confidence. There are going to be some people in that room that you may lose, and you know what? That is okay, because what you're doing is you're taking your business and your knowledge acumen and you're putting it on display. That's one of the things I love to do in my presentations, is I want to lose people, because that's going to make them ask me questions. And now you can really show what you know. And that gives you more opportunity. Always dress professionally, right? If you have a relaxed environment, that's okay, that's fine. Dress the course, but always dress up. As Black people, we always have to be 3-4 times better. So always look the part if you can. Set an agenda and stick to it. You've heard that already. When you do, and this is one of the most important things when you do a call like this, is to test your lighting, test your connectivity and your audio before you present. We've had 100 discussions and we've had 95 technical problems. And it just happens. There's nothing that you can do about it. So it's always make sure you are prepared for that, to ensure everything that you're doing is available and ready. And this is my biggest takeaway. And I understand there are going to be times when you have to turn off your camera, but make sure your camera is on. Make your eye contact. That shows your engagement. That shows that you want to be there. Even right now in these times of COVID, if your teacher doesn't have his or her face online, put out there, hey, can you please turn on your camera? I want to see you. I want to see your expressions. I want to understand what's going on. If they don't do it, then hey, you asked, right? But that's a very important thing, is to make sure your camera is on. And what that also does is it minimizes and eliminates those other distractions. Use appropriate hand gestures and facial expressions. Don't go over the top, as Mr. Levy said. Don't go reaching and looking up and shaking your head and jingling keys in your pockets. Stay confident, stay focused, stay on task. That means you are controlling the discussion. All eyes need to be on you, because you are so just locked into this presentation that nothing else matters. And you want people to come with you. And most importantly, have fun, right? This is you up here. Nobody's going to know the topic like you do. So you might as well enjoy the time and have fun. Video telecommunications don'ts. As you can see, the other gentlemen that are here, they have their mics muted. What that does is it eliminates background noise in case a kid may yell out, a dog may bark or something, and it'll take away from the discussion. So if you are not speaking, keep your microphone muted. Disable your camera, don't do that, right? Again, as we just talked about, don't fidget, don't get off topic, because if you get off topic, somebody's going to take the discussion somewhere that you don't want it to go, and it's going to take away from your final delivery. And the biggest, do not lose composure. There are going to be people that want to challenge you, because there could be some people that want to be in the position that you're in. Stay respectful, stay mindful of who's in that room. And the biggest thing that I've learned, and something that my father taught me when I was a little kid, from the janitor to the president, everybody is yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, no, ma'am. Everybody deserves the same level of respect. It does not matter how big you get or how small you are, you treat everybody the same. And in the end, don't be rude or unapproachable. If somebody wants to come to you afterwards, because some people just don't like to ask questions, They don't want to sound like they're dumb or whatever focus you may want to say on that. But just be open to any discussion. Okay, just be available, be honest, and just be there for those people to have discussion. And finally, the biggest takeaway is, as you're putting your presentations together, ask yourself these following questions. Why am I sharing this information? Who's going to care about it, right? How is it going to help them? How is it going to help me? And if it's going to be about money, does it make financial sense? If you cannot relay these things in your mind, then you do not have grounds for a presentation that is going to be valid. That's just my humble opinion on that. I'll be more than happy to let the other panelists speak on it should they care, but these are the things I believe are viable. I think these are the things that can help you. They've helped me. I've watched and listened to Mr. Levy, Mr. Cole, Mr. Wiggins, and others. And even though we're not having a discussion much like the one that we're having, I'm listening, because there is always what's called tidbits of information that you can take away and capture. As these men were talking, you may have seen me moving a little bit. I've taken a few notes down, things that I had not considered before, but I can make part of my discussion repertoire as I continue to advance in my career. So with that, I will leave the floor from that and open things up to any questions that any of you may have. Thank you again for the time.
Hey, Mr. Nolan, thank you so much. We really do appreciate that wonderful information on how to communicate effectively and just those best tips for practicing online. This is something that we all need to get good at, since it looks like Zoom's going to be Zoom, Google Meets, whatever is going to be here for at least the short to medium term. There's a good chance that even as society returns to normal, that we're not going to be going away from digital communications in all aspects. So we hope that you guys enjoyed that conversation. We'll open up the floor to any questions for Mr. Nolan. And go ahead and type those in the Q&A for our audience so that we can go ahead and answer those. If you haven't if you haven't asked a question as of yet, we challenge you to go ahead and use this opportunity to get it out there. We want you guys to be as curious as possible, not miss out on any information that you otherwise would have appreciated. Okay. Not hearing any questions, we will go ahead and move on to the, oh wait, let me pull that up. I have one. Give me a second. I have misplaced my Q&R bar. I do apologize.
I have it here, Mr. Cole.
Okay.
Somebody asked a question, when I'm talking or presenting via Zoom, I should look at the camera, right? That is correct. You want to look at the camera, and if you have individuals on your screen, you can take time to look at them individually with direct contact and move around to show, one, that you are confident in what you're doing, but to also show other people that you are not just honed in on one person, but you're there to talk to everyone. And so just be confident, move around the room, and look at the various individuals on the screen.
Another question we have here in the question and answer pod is in the area of challenging questions. And Mr. Levy talked a little bit about this earlier, but Mr. Nolan, if you could emphasize in response to this question, what would you do if someone brought up a difficult question that you don't have the answer to?
Okay, that is a phenomenal, phenomenal question. The one thing that you should always do, well, in this case, right, we'll move away from virtual and we'll talk about a little bit about being back in the room together. And then I'll get back to virtual. Always take someone else with you to your presentation. Always have someone that is more of a technical expert in the room with you. So if there is something that's asked that may be above your knowledge level, and then it could be something that that individual would know. Now, if it is something that you do not know, it's okay to say you don't, and let them know that you will do the appropriate research and get back to them as soon as possible on that. But the key is to make sure you do. There is no hesitation. I would make that my top priority. As soon as I got back to my office, assuming I wasn't there, I would begin the research. I would get with people who were more knowledgeable about the subject and come up with a solution and a recommendation and or some type of response and get that out as soon as possible.
Awesome. I think one of our last questions here in the Q&A pod from one of our Kappa Leaguers is related to that virtual world that we've been talking about, potentially Zoom or Google Meets, and that is, how do you ask your questions clearly without interrupting others when your cameras are forced to be off? So this is again, environment of Google Meets, Zoom, and you want to hop in for a question, but don't want to be disruptive or interrupt folks.
Sure. So there are definitely ways to do that. So in this case, Mr. Cole, I believe, is the host of this presentation. So there are ways within Zoom, and I'm assuming some of the other platforms, that you can send a private message directly to that individual. So that is an option of doing that. But if you have a question, don't ever feel that you can't ask it. Right? If you have to get your question in there, I mean, you won't be able to make a statement to where you're going to be heard in some instances, but put your question out there. And if somebody is talking and you guys start, let's say you may talk at the same time, just say, I'm sorry, sir, you please go first, but I have a follow-on question. Just make sure that people know that there's an additional question that's out there to be asked. Yes, sir, Mr. Levy.
If I can add to that, as we're talking about virtual meetings, one strategy that you can employ is to have a partner in the meeting. If you're doing the presenting, have someone that is going to monitor the chat, monitor the Q&A, or take questions and actions for you. Because if you're presenting, it's very difficult to present and take notes. So if you can have a partner with you or someone to partner up with you that's going to record the significant points, or if you said you'd made a commitment to get back to someone, that they make a note so you can remember later on, or just monitor the chat for questions.
All right, thank you for that additional, Mr. Lee. That was great. Are there any other questions? If not, I will say thank you and move forward.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Lone. Thank you all to our panelists. So what we're going to do is, in the time that we have left, so we have about 30 minutes left in the time that we have together. I do have some questions here that I prepared for the entire panelists. And Mr. Wiggins, Mr. Sprouse, feel free to jump in as well as we ask these questions. Okay, this can be an open discussion. And then we'll try to cap the conversation at around the 4:15, 4:20 mark. All right. So my first question, so the entire panel is for all types of communication, whether it's written, whether it's speaking, whether it's through Zoom. When is it proper to use big and sophisticated SAT style words versus just common to understand language? This goes back to knowing your audience and then knowing who you're speaking to, but at the same time, you want to, make sure that you're speaking at a high level without going over people's heads.
Can I catch that question? That question, I would steer away from using, and I'm dragging, I see that, large words, for fear of not saying them correctly, spelled miscorrectly on the PowerPoint, because all I'm going to hear and see is that mistake up there. So the rule of thumb that I do, is I've been taught, is to speak just slightly above the level of audience that you're dealing with. Now, it's not saying dumb it down, but it does say make it so it's comprehensible. See, that's why you shouldn't use big words, that you can comprehend what's just being said. That's my answer. I'm dragging, sorry.
Excellent. Anybody else?
I like to provide a perspective on that too as well. So, and again, my perspective is coming from my environment, having served in the military. And I'll pick on the Army. I'm an Air Force guy, but I'll pick on the Army. If you're communicating the way you're taught in the Army, you know, at some point they're not afraid to communicate some point to as lowest level as possible that you need to communicate that point. My philosophy is I do the KISS principle. I try to keep it simple. Personal experience where I work today, one of my tasks is I help with proposal writing and trying to write a proposal to develop a solution for a customer, and you write what that solution is for that customer, understanding that that customer is going to read your proposal and make a determination on it. There are several big words and fancy engineering terms and techniques and stuff that I can use in that proposal, but I keep it simple. I write it in a way, again, I know the audience, but you know, if I need to keep it technical, I keep it technical. But if it's an audience who's not technical, you know, I don't focus on words that are going to overly complicate this thing here. All right. So going back to what Mr. Cole said, know your audience. All right. But at the end of the day, for me, my personal things, I try to keep it as simple as possible, and I try to communicate in a way that everyone I know will understand. There will be no misinterpretation or someone saying, you know, what does he mean? What is discombobulated? Why don't you just say confused? All right. So that's my perspective.
All right. Anybody else before we move on? Excellent, excellent. So thank you so much. Really powerful answers. So the next question that we'll get into are part of being a good communicator, we already talked about earlier in the session, is being an active listener. So for each of the communication modes, what are just some pro tips for being an active listener, just staying engaged and making sure that you're receiving the message clearly and taking the time to digest it before you give your response, just so that nothing is lost in communication, just so you can make sure that you're understanding the other person's point and not just speaking to say your own. So active listening, any other pro tips?
Well, one of the simplest and key foundational principles with active listening is repeating what you heard. And, you know, if someone says something, the easiest thing to say is, what I heard you say is, and repeat it back. If there's any miscommunication or misunderstanding, that is the point where it can be clarified. It shows that you are listening. It shows that you are engaged. It shows that you are taking an interest because you are trying to make sure that you understand specifically what they said. This is particularly important in one-on-one conversations. As a manager, a supervisor, or someone who is leading others, when you get into a situation when you're speaking with subordinates about an issue, it's extremely important that you use this technique, either as the person that is leading the conversation or the person that is receiving the information. What I heard you say is, and repeat it back.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Mr. Levy. The one thing that I do, and I tell people this all the time, is, and as individuals, we are all different, right? So we all take information in differently and we all focus differently. I don't look at the person direct, especially when it's something that they're really trying to convey that I need to just really take in and absorb. And I will tell them, hey, I'm listening to you. This is the way that I focus. And so that allows me to just focus strictly on what I'm hearing. And going back to the point that Mr. Levy just made, I'll regurgitate what I thought I heard or thought I understood and give them the opportunity to clarify or validate that what I had heard is exactly what it was. Now I'm focused, I'm understanding them, and now I can go back and place my eye contact and continue the conversation.
Okay. Excellent, excellent. So let me go ahead and move on to the next question. Really powerful answer. So when I need to resolve a conflict with someone, what are the pros and cons of doing so face to face, or these days Zoom to Zoom, or through an email or a text messages? So pros and cons of doing it each way.
Let me jump in. I think a pro would be in lieu of face to face, because I can read body response, nonverbal. I can hear influx of voice. I can see facial. All of that means something while you're speaking. If you have an issue, I have 3 email policy at work, and we're trying to resolve an issue. And after 3 emails, the phone is ringing because I now need to have a conversation. So I prefer you handle it face to face or by Zoom. I think it was said probably by Levy and Brother Cody. Probably Cody was talking about what to Mr. Cody, excuse me, was to not say that in the text. Or it's too easy to do that, and then all of a sudden, what happens, or I find to happen, is I will influence what you're saying by the way that I think you cussing me out, so I'm screaming, and you just said good morning, but the tone was wrong. You said good morning. So it just adds to the fuel as opposed to clearing it up, face to face, Zoom it, or have a phone conversation if you can.
Anybody want to piggyback on it?
No, total agreement with what Mr. Wiggins said. Sometimes it's best to be the bigger person and just reach out and say, hey, can we get together for just a quick conversation, whether it's a social distance get together or if it's a Zoom call. Hey, can we just talk real quick? Let's clear the air, right? We're adults, we're professionals. Let's get beyond wherever we are. We still have to work together. So let's see if we can squash the concerns that may be separating us at this point. Or maybe we're just talking past each other. So let's have that conversation and just clear the air, if you will, and work it out from there.
And Brother Nolan brings up a very good point. And you see his approach is, can we just clear the air? Reason being, silence doesn't make the issue go away. Waiting doesn't make the issue go away. And more often than not, especially in a professional environment, I mean, I say professional environment because that is an environment where it is expected that we take emotion out of what we're dealing with. It's about business, it's not personal, as opposed to having a conflict with someone that you know personally. In a professional environment, we tend to make things seem more bigger and more divisive or more difficult than they actually are. When you get down to the conversation, when you get down to addressing it, it turns out that it wasn't as big as you made it out to be, as you were sitting there being concerned about it. Mr. Nolan makes a very good point. Can we just get to the bottom of this? Mr. Wiggins says, if we're still talking about it after 2 emails, we're going to get together and talk about it. Both of those gentlemen are saying, address it up front.
Excellent, excellent. And then we had 2 more questions. I did see another one in the chat. So another question that we wanted to give the group was, what are the benefits of silence or taking time to respond to something that you've heard? So this might be a pause when you're speaking to somebody in person or on the video, or if it's written communication, what are the benefits of just taking a little bit of time for the air to clear, for that message to digest before sending your own response? So just the benefits of just waiting or taking a neutral approach before.
Absolutely will recommend it. If you're not comfortable immediately in providing a response, there's nothing wrong with taking a breath or 2 to get your thoughts together and then answer the question. But again, if you don't feel you can come up with a tangible response, it's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, that is a great question. Let me get back to you on that. Let me put some time into my thought process so that I can give you an appropriate response. That is an absolutely fine response to give to anyone at any location.
And to add to that, as you're having discussions, particularly one-on-one discussions, having that pause or that silent moment is fine. You know, the airwaves don't have to be full with noise all the time. That moment is there for reflection. It's there for the other person to ingest what it is that's just been said, come up with a question, a clarifying question, another point. So silence is okay.
Yeah, to Mr. Levy, Mr. Nolan's point, I'm going to echo Mr. Cody's points on taking that pause. You actually take emotion out of your response. Sometimes you need a moment. I'm furious for not answering the question till a day later. I had a mate who had to proofread my emails because I'm spitting fire. I'm feeling good too. And then walk away 24 hours. She made me have a 24-hour rule. Mark, you cannot send anything out of here until you come back the next day. And often the changes were made. I go back and I am embarrassed. Ooh, I wrote that. Ooh, this is not good. Not at all. Not what I was trying to say. And guess what? That is absolutely okay. That you learn to know yourself so much that you go, let me take a moment and back off. One writing tip that I was given as far as emails and whatever, and even speaking, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is sometimes it's good to get it all out, whatever it may be, so we can get to the root. So write it all out. Don't do it in an email. Pick up a Word document because you accidentally send, we have a whole nother issue. Write it all out. I mean, all of it. I'm dropping bombs. I'm this, and then go, I sure feel better. Now let me go back and say what I need to say. This is what I want to say, and this is what I need to say. And you'll find out eventually you won't have to do that other practice so much because you recognize it doesn't make sense because you're going to get lost. I think one of the biggest things, and Brother Levy could probably speak to this, Mr. Levy will speak to this, in that environment that you work in, and Mr. Nolan, clear, concise, and to the point is the rule of effective communication or direct communication. A lot of words have to come out. And those words are transitionals, emotionals, I feels, I thoughts, or whatever. It's not fact, they're not reading it. And then you lose the opportunity to communicate your point or answer some particular question. So those are my hacks.
Excellent, excellent. And then I have one last question, and then there's one more in the Q&A. So my last question is, let's say 2 years from now, I'm a student, I've taken all of the tips I've learned today. 2 years from now, I'm a better communicator than I am now. I'm a great communicator. So how do I work with somebody who's either introverted or they struggle to articulate their point clearly? Maybe there's a cultural or language background. How do you work with somebody? And if these people are on the same team as you, how do you move forward with somebody who struggles with effective communication?
Well, just remember where you were when you struggled. You know, everybody, it's a learning process for everyone. You provide, first you provide opportunity. There's no substitute for practice. Mr. Wiggins will tell you that before he speaks, he rehearses. He goes through and he says the words over and over again. And after a while, he doesn't need to rehearse as much, but at the very beginning, you need to rehearse. So you give that same advice. If someone is having difficulty presenting, you ask them, let's rehearse that. Come to me and talk me through, tell me what it is you want to say, and let me help refine the ideas and the presentation. Take out some of those words, take out some of those stumbling blocks, and get it to be in your mind a little bit clearer. You coach them. You didn't become an effective speaker overnight. So if you're in a position to work with someone and coach them, give back. It's all about helping somebody else grow based on your experience.
All right, any other answers? Anybody want to piggyback on that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Mr. Levy. So there's something else to consider. There are courses that you can take that are speech courses, right? You can actually go and apply, especially when you get to college, take a speech course. That will help you, that will push you. The teacher will critique you, and that'll be done amongst your peers. And what that also allows you to do is to work with your peers who may have some of the same concerns and situations, and you guys help each other. Also, in this day of social media, you can go on, if you're allowed to, right, as high school students or middle school students, go on Facebook and do a search. There are groups that are out there, I'm sure, that you can look for, and you guys help each other. Again, as Mr. Levy has just stated, it's about helping the other person. You know, I had my qualms with speaking in front of people. And once I took courses and I was just thrown out there to the wolves, you learn, right? You will have bad episodes, you'll have good episodes, but it's developing a comfort level. And once you develop your level of comfort, it doesn't matter who you speak to or when you speak, the preparation is what you'll understand is most important. You will regurgitate, you will play over and over and over again what you want to say. I wrote 2 pages of notes down here, and I never really had to look at it because I went through it, right? And I knew what I wanted to say. So just practice. Practice is the biggest thing, right? Mr. Levy, the same. So just practice.
Adding on to that, those great pieces of information from a leadership perspective. I think the question again was about dealing with someone else, and the coaching is the spot. Asking permission first. Hey, can we talk about how you and I communicate? Let me tell you how I communicate and how I like to receive communication. And then we can go from there. And let me ask you, what is that you are struggling with, or you seem to be this, or I view or peer, all the great HR balancing words where we're not going at somebody, all of the technical stuff. Then let them talk. I have people that work under me that are terrified to speak, but are great with numbers and figures and writing. So our main communication form is what they would like to do. So you need to be versatile, right? If you're going to be a great leader, and I put Brother Levy in that category, sorry, Mr. Levy, Mr. Sprouls, Mr. Cody, Mr. Cole, Mr. Nolan as great leaders, you have the ability to understand your team. Why are you going to continue to put our teammates in positions of failure when it really requires some communication and coaching and encouragement, right? I'm not going to put you in front of the board of directors when you know you can't speak. I'm just not going to do it. It's not going to serve us well if you cannot deliver the numbers. Tell me what you need me to say. And you know what I'm saying? So that's what I would say. Work with them, like Mr. Levy said. Don't forget where you have come from and recognize that this is the number 1, 2 fear in the world. Still, it's public speaking or speaking in public or speaking on platform. People don't want to do it. I am in the 1% who says, pass me the mic and lights and I'm gone. So, but I didn't always, I'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, those are good questions, great questions.
Excellent. I really do appreciate all of those wonderful answers. Thank you so much, brothers, for that really robust discussion. We hope that you, the audience, learned something from that discussion. You've been taking notes on the side as something to take home with you when you leave today's webinar. So we're getting to the end of the agenda. I wanted to throw the ball to Mr. Mark Wiggins, who is our speaking extraordinaire and our expert in-house in Dulles-Leesburg, to kind of close us out and to challenge the audience what they should do next now that they've heard this discussion. So Mr. Wiggins, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. That was 10 seconds. Actually, it was around 13 seconds. Did that seem long to you? Was the silence like deafening? Did you actually get like, I'm checking my sound, what's going on, what's wrong with everything? 10 seconds is a long time. 10 seconds is the exact amount of time that you have to get the ball from the baseline over the half court line every single basketball game you play. 10 seconds. You have 10 seconds to shoot a free throw. You're watching the athlete shoot a free throw and they pause and you're like, hurry up and shoot. I have 10 seconds. To some, it's an eternity. To some, it's a great way to get your thoughts together. For some, like me, I love torturing my audience. I just stand there and look at them and see who cracks first. It is what it is. Being able to utilize your pauses and your space and your time to get people's attention is a weapon, right? It's crucial. Pregnant pauses, well-placed pauses. It shows like you're gathering your thoughts. And guess what? You probably are gathering your thoughts. There's a lot to be said for nonverbal communication, especially on this platform and in person, whereby I don't play poker or cards for an exact reason, because I will tell everything in my hand like, oh, yeah, oh, it's not gonna work now. I don't do it well, but I have learned to use my facial features, my expression, my position, my persona as a tool to make your emphasis known so people can understand what you're saying, what you're doing. Speaking is one of those things that give you, I'm dare say, an unfair advantage. Brief, quick story. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and I went to the community church. My parents spent all their time. I spent all my time there, morning service, night service, Wednesday night service, Thursday night service, and then back again on Sunday morning service. And then there was Sunday school. And one of those things we had to do was every holiday, Easter, pick one, Easter, Mother's Day, no Father's Day, no one does anything for Father's Day. We had to get these poems and recitation, there's a good one for you, and get up and quote that. My father made me learn the first, 7 Genesis, the beginning. In the beginning, God created that one, and had to practice it over and over. Then we put me in front of the church and make me deliver this speech, and I was terrified. That's okay. All I wanted to get to the candy. Give me the candy. I was like, give me to the candy, bro. I just had to. What I've gotten to know and grow as I've gotten older is to recognize those were the moments I actually learned how to speak. In situations where you have to get over your fear and get out there and do it. We've heard it about repetition, about getting out there, running your message. When I coach people pay me to teach them how to speak and how to put their message together to do what Mr. Cody said, a beginning, a middle, and an end. This is what I'm fixing to tell you. This is what I'm going to tell you. And this is what I just told you. And you get paid lots of money to do this stuff. It's really, really, really cool. It's amazing how people cannot do it effectively. So I'm usually pretty critical of myself and others around me. But what I begin to understand is that there's a benefit to being able to speak. Let me fast forward. I was reading a little bit about Hoya paranoia. For those who are old enough to know exactly what that is. So Georgetown back in the day, when John Thompson, rest his soul, senior, was coaching Georgetown, and he would not allow certain things. He didn't allow the media. He didn't allow his players to speak too long. And he knew part of that reason was a lot of these young men could not speak well. You can ball out, but I put a mic in front of you and it's beyond and whatever. It's a disaster. And thereby taking away from your skill set and giving other people something to talk about that you cannot speak versus the skill of what you can actually do. Right? Because we had this Hoya paranoia thing. And so out of that, these young men began to learn how to speak and focus on education. So there's something about having speech as part of your weapon toolkit. I learned along the way that people look at you differently when you can actually hold a sentence. They look at you differently and respect you differently when you can complete a whole thought and deliver it. You could be dead wrong on position, but it was well delivered. So that's interesting. Wrong, but interesting, right? If there's opportunities to speak, you need to get up and take them. You got to face the fear. There's a presentation you got to do in a Zoom situation. You need to be speaking first and often. It's all about practice. You heard it throughout today. And the word, Mr. Nolan, is, now I just lost the word I was about to say, with confirmation. There's my favorite word. We've not heard anybody's presentation, but funny, we're all saying the same things because it is that important that you need to be able to deliver your message, but it takes practice. So don't be afraid of it. And I'm going to give you 3.5 tips because I don't do long talking anymore. Well, that's not true either, but I do, but I only have a little bit of time. I'm gonna give you 3.5 tips that you can use right now to take full advantage of learning how to speak and every opportunity. And Kappa League is gonna give you those opportunities to not only learn leadership, but to learn how to speak. That is also part of leadership. I was on a call this afternoon with my team trying to convey how upset I was about a lack of performance in the store, and I had to be caught up with something. And they all know my temperament when it comes to certain things. Customer service is a hands down, I'm about to go off slightly professionally, of course. We can't have it where I work. We just can't have it. So we were having a discussion. I was communicating with my manager about the areas of deficiency. I could feel myself getting a little heated, right? And it wasn't a professional form like this, and I'm usually pretty free with my words, but I've learned something. When you switch your tone and you switch what you're trying to say, how you normally speak, all of a sudden people hear you differently. I went slow, I went low, even. That's a problem. I was clear, concise, spoke to the issues, didn't attack. All I wanted, I'm just being real, I wanted to, but it's not gonna get me what I ultimately need, which is better performance. So it's a lot that you need to understand when it comes to speaking, but it's a great, great thing to have. So let me give you 3.5 reasons why you need to learn how to speak and speak well and speak efficiently. Number one, I hope you're writing notes down there. I know I'm recording, but here we go. Number one, it helps in leadership. I just gave you an example of how good leaders communicate effectively. It is probably one of the top traits. If you do some searching, most great leaders, good to great leaders, are effective in communication. Now, the biggest misnomer about communication is that it actually happened. People think good communication. I told everybody how I felt. We should be good. That doesn't necessarily mean it was good communication. But when you're a leader, you have to be able to do it. And that's actually just more than just speaking. It's actually also receiving, active listening, repeating back, making comments. If you heard me say, I will reference one of the other men who made something. Maybe I had the wrong person, but I had the point right. That's active. That's involved. So you want to make sure you do that. Number two, nonverbal speaks volumes. Nonverbal speaks volumes. I sat here for 10 seconds, didn't say a word, and everybody heard everything I was saying. Had I done some facial expressions or whatever, I mean, we'd do a whole quiz on it, but you're nonverbal. If you're not, I just gave you a whole paragraph of how I'm feeling. And those few gestures, your nonverbal speaks volumes. Be careful how you present, how you posture, and how you position yourself. Use it so people can't pick you apart, but also use it as part of your arsenal. There's a way to use that, right? The third thing is learning how to be an effective, to use speech in your communication helps you to win more. It helps you to win more. And I'm not just talking about arguments, because you have to be a great debater to run arguments and win. You got to be great on your feet, logic, and whatever. When I say win more, I'm talking about delivering your points at the job. I'm talking about communicating, getting what you want out of situations, speaking to that raise, speaking to your performances, speaking to injustice, speaking to whatever, and people actually listen to you. The win is not that you get what you want. The win is that people will listen to you because you have something to say of value. Don't miss that. You have something to say of value. Learning how to speak will help you win more. And here is the 0.5. The 0.5 is simply this. In my speaking, I give a 0.5, my half point. One, it does a couple of things. One, you go, what in the world is a 0.5? Two, exactly, it's the last thing I say, which is probably the first thing and only thing you're going to remember. That's why I give it to you last. It is your unfair advantage. A well-spoken person is at an unfair advantage over almost everyone else because they cannot or refuse to or don't want to put themselves out there to express their opinion. If you can learn to put yourself out there and express your opinion and fear of being wrong sometimes, just don't be loud and wrong. If you're wrong, that's fine. Just don't be loud and wrong. It's okay. If you learn how to argue and debate and have constructive conversations, speaking will help you get places. They will look at you differently. You're already going to come in there looking fresh because you come out of Kappa League. We have an expectation now. You say Kappa League, we expect you to come out of here looking like this. Then you go to speak and you open your mouth and you have something to say. We look at you differently. I'm sorry, it is what it is, but it is also your unfair advantage because those who do not speak miss opportunities. They miss opportunities. My son goes to Hampden-Sydney College down in Farmville, VA. It's one of them old, rich dollar schools that two presidents have come out of. They got 900 students and $5 billion in endowments. I don't know how that works, but that's what they got down there. One of the classes that they have to take, of the two they must take, every freshman, is rhetoric. Rhetoric. I'm walking through the campus and I'm noticing these young men are just speaking different. I'm like, what is going on down here? They're well-spoken. Their thoughts are clear. They take debate. They go at it. They have their way of getting down is they have these debates on these big issues. And my son sits here talking to me. I'm like, I don't know. Somebody just give me something to eat because I'm losing what he's talking about. They're so much at an advantage when they get out of that school because they've learned that skill set, and it is a skill. So make sure that you learn a skill to give yourself an unfair advantage so you can move along your career. So let me repeat these out the way. Number one, it helps you in leadership. Leaders must be effective communicators. Number two, your nonverbal speaks volumes. How you posture, how you position, says things when you don't say it. Three, you will win more. I need you to hear me. I need to communicate. I need you to understand what I'm saying. That's the win. And the 0.5, it is your unfair advantage because everybody doesn't want to do it. And that's the reason why you should learn how to speak more influentially and more effectively and all the good stuff because it is a great weapon for you to have for your career. Ms. Cole.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Wiggins. We've heard a lot about words. We've heard a lot about communication. We've heard a lot about speaking, and the three-letter word that I have to describe my emotions and my moments of reflection about today's webinar is wow. Thank you so much. On behalf of the Dulles-Leesburg Guidewrite program, I'd like to give a virtual round of applause to all of our speakers today. We had an opportunity to hear from Mr. Levy about being deliberate and taking your time while presenting, being precise, being an active listener as a presenter, and managing emotions. We heard from Mr. Cody about emphasizing the importance of appropriate email addresses, which is something I had to learn as a 15, 16-year-old and transitioning from some of the descriptors of what I thought was a cool email address, but also placing the bottom line up front. We heard that not only from Mr. Cody, but also from a number of other speakers today. We heard from Mr. Nolan on the area of emphasis in video communication regarding treating everyone with respect, proper microphone and camera techniques, as well as maintaining professionalism, even in this Zoom, Google Meets, and virtual environment. Lastly, we heard from Mr. Wiggins on the communication being essential for leadership, nonverbal communication. It helps to win more. Mr. Wiggins, I love to win. So to hear that communication is a key asset in winning, that is a nugget that I'll definitely take away from today's discussion in addition to many others that were mentioned. We truly appreciate their presentations and you all as attendees on today's webinar. And again, we're grateful for your participation today. The next webinar under this Guidewrite platform will take place next month. And for those of you that aren't familiar with our Kappa League program, these young men meet on a monthly basis. And in these monthly meetings, they handle the business of Kappa League. Their next meeting is taking place on Tuesday, and they'll have an opportunity to vote on the topic for our November webinar. We've got 2 on the table for them to vote on, but again, that vote will take place on Tuesday, and then we'll send out the invitation to you all who received it, as well as others, for the November webinar. So stay tuned, and as part of that webinar, as a treat for you to come back, we'll talk about some of the resources that are useful for communication. So we'll include a 1-pager of resources for effective communication. One of the questions we had in the Q&A was just resources, books, and anything that would be useful documents for folks to refer back to. So as a way to get you back for the November webinar, we'll include a 1-pager with hyperlinks and other things for you all to have those resources from today's webinar. So once again, on behalf of the Dulles-Leesburg Guidewrite program, we'd like to thank you, presenters, for your contributions today, as well as those of you that were able to attend. With that being said, this webinar was recorded, so you'll have an opportunity on our Kappa League TV channel to tune in to the recording and again, capture some of those nuggets that you weren't able to write down at the moment of them being presented. Once again, thanks again, and we look forward to you tuning in next time.
Thank you so much, everybody.